Welcome to the Fjook Enterprises YouTube channel. It's Wednesday, which means we're having a conversation, and I have a guest today, like I sometimes do on Wednesday. We are talking about Vampire the Masquerade, therefore I have Leaf here with me.
Hello.
Welcome, heroes and villains, to the Fjook Enterprises YouTube channel. Take a moment, relax, stop your bickering, and just enjoy the show. Vampires via the World of Darkness system. What sets them
Yeah.
apart from the other role playing systems out there that you can be vampires in?
The lore mainly, the mechanic system, the social organization of the vampires, and most like okay, so like when people think of like playing a vampire in a tabletop system, they're gonna think D&D. In D&D, pretty much you're a vampire. Congratulations. You probably have a sire, the vampire that made you. But unless you're playing like from one like the mage card games that's now in D&D, you're not gonna be part of any larger organization than like a little club of vampires. In Vampire the Masquerade, every vampire comes from a clan, unless they're Catif, and at which point they're kind of just like let loose on the world. But even like the anarchists will still have like a clan heritage. So there's essentially in Vampire the Masquerade there are blood lineages that a vampire comes from, and these blood lineages affect like their appearance sometimes because there's some that are cursed with literally ugliness, like the Nosferatu. They have been cursed literally being ugly, like horrifyingly ugly. Like you see an Nosferatu, you either puke or you scream in utter fear and terror of how ugly they are. It's a problem for them, but they work around it. Also some of your behavioral traits will be influenced by your blood lineage. Some of your stats and your, of course, your disciplines, your vampire powers. They'll all be influenced by this blood heritage of coming from a particular clan. And so that's pretty much probably the big thing that separates vampires from World of Darkness is like the lore, their social organization, and the actual rule mechanic of the game of the storytelling system versus other games.
I didn't know where to put this question in this interview, but I knew I wanted to ask this question because I haven't asked you this question yet. What is the curse of Vampire the Masquerade?
Oh, that's the Curse of Cain or the Mark of Cain, right? So, okay, so this is one of the things that kind of sticks out the vampires, right? Why they're different from other systems that have vampires. We can do be vampire is that at least Cainite vampires come from Cain. So in the World of Darkness, there literally was a biblical Cain and a biblical Abel. There was a biblical, their father who was something I'm drawing a blank on. Who you think I remember this? But anyway, so these were like the biblical stories actually did kind of actually happened. So the biblical Cain actually did kill the biblical Abel and was cursed by God in the form of like four angels that just like layered this level of curse on him. That became vampirism. So the curse of Cain is vampirism, and every Canaanite vampire is descended from Cain, thus perpetuating the curse.
I am aware that there's the Dark Age setting books, and I know that the main setting is modern times. Are those the only two settings for Vampire the Masquerade?
No, I think there's a Renaissance version too. Just because because essentially the way the World of Darkness and the White Wolf and whoever now owns the product Paradox or whatever. I think it's Paradox now that owns it. Or they own part of it, or it's a story on its own. They've always like the Dark Ages was a very monumental time in Europe only. Europe had Dark Age. Everywhere else in the world was kind of actually having a good time historically. Like they're having golden ages while Europe was having a craptastic time. But because World Darkness is very European centric, Western centric, a lot of it, the Dark Age was a very impactful time. So typically they also have like the Wild West. There's also like the Renaissance era because those are also very impactful times for the West. Uh, so yeah, so I think there is a Renaissance period time for the vampires. I know there's one for the mage, but I think there's also for the vampires.
Is the difference between Vampire the Masquerade and Vampire the Requiem more than just mechanical differences?
Yes. They have changed some of the lore. Like they've dropped some of the clans. They've merged the clans. They've changed the overall history and the backstory of both worlds and how they operate and the origins of all these supernatural critters, including vampires. So there is mechanical differences. There is story differences, and there are social organization differences within world for social organizations. What they are, I'm a little vague on because I'm not really up on like Chronicles of Darkness. World Darkness is my jam. So I'm I'm really vague on that, on the whole, what specific differences there are. I just know there are differences.
If a group of players wants to get into Vampire the Masquerade, which version of the setting should they do?
Like Chronicles of Darkness is a good system. It is. It's just I have emotional attachment to the World of Darkness and meant emotional sentimentality toward it. So it's my game. So and I'm an old bitter gamer when in those matters. So that's my game. So I will always recommend 20th Anniversary Edition, as it's pretty much everything from first, second, revised, all shoved into and updated for 20th Anniversary Edition. They're still making books for it. There's also 5th edition of Vampire the Masquerade. It's also a good system. I don't particularly like it because some of the editorial choices that have been made have had some real world negative effects. I don't have to get into them right now. It's just there's been real world negative effects from some of their editorial choices. So I like the kickstarted 20th Anniversary Edition because it's just two massive books. And that's what I recommend is the 20th Anniversary Edition.
I know there was a period of time where the books really weren't selling that well, and if I recall, you mentioned that it was due to the live-action role players that kept the game alive. Is that accurate?
Yeah. Oh yeah. No. It was that point when White Wolf, the former owners, of and essentially the source of the White Wolf curse, they're transitioning from World of Darkness to their new World of Darkness, which became Chronicles of Darkness. So they pretty much killed off their old World of Darkness or classic World of Darkness in a single year with a bunch of these end of the world books, and then they transferred over into New World of Darkness, which became Chronicles of Darkness. But there's a bunch of people that were still fans of the old or classic World of Darkness, and a lot of those were the vampire LARPers from from the big cities in the States and Canada. Vancouver, I think, had a community. Toronto had a community. I know Montreal did. Montreal definitely did. I think there was one down in Los Angeles or San Francisco or both. There's also one over in New York. There's probably one somewhere in the South. I can't remember where, but I think there was one somewhere in the Southern states. It quite gravely could have been Miami or Dallas or Texas, or somewhere in rural Alabama. I can't remember. But it was really big in Europe. Like Paris has and still does have a very large community of vampire LARPers, and so does Berlin. Berlin, like Germany, Berlin, huge Vampire the Masquerade LARPers, like massive community. And they were very influential, and they kept playing it. And so when White Wolf, I think, still owned it at this point, because again, I think they have partial ownership of the IP. They did a test of a Kickstarter for Vampire the Masquerade, and it went gangbusters. It got so big that they ended up doing 2 books, because it actually comes in 2 books. There's the main core, which is everything that they intended, and then there's the second book, which is everything that the Kickstarter backed, right? Is all the extra prizes and stuff like that. So it's 2 it's 2 books. You put them together, it's a fairly thick tome. Yeah, well, so big, yeah, big enough that you could drop it on your foot and go I felt that. So it went gangbusters, and so they just started going through the other titles and doing these Kickstarters, and all of them went huge, and they went far exceeded any of their expectations. Here's oh yeah, we were expecting this amount, but we got this huge amount. Like you'd almost think it was like a fish story of like, I did a Kickstarter that did this much money. But yeah, so yeah, it was very much because of those LARPers in Europe and in North America. I think actually, I think there's also a community. Not to forget Mexico. Sorry, I forgot Mexico. You should never forget Mexico because Mexico is a really nice place. Uh, there's also one in Mexico City. I think there's that was a LARPing group. I think, if I believe correct, if I remember correctly. So take everything I've said with a grain of salt when it like where the communities have been. I'm except for Berlin and Paris. I know for sure they were in Berlin and Paris.
White Wolf Curse. What is that exactly?
Okay, so the White Wolf Curse. Every like at a certain point, any kind of company that does some sort of entertainment media would try to branch out into other forms of media, like TV shows, comic books, video games, novels, that kind of stuff. So but White Wolf has never had like the publishing for that, right? So they've sold their IP to do certain things, right? To do all the shows, and none of them have succeeded. In fact, every company that has bought that IP to do that new media has failed spectacularly. So there was a Vampire the Masquerade TV show. It lasted for all of 2 seasons because the main actor that played the Prince of the City, died in a motorcycle accident or a car accident after shooting the second season. And then the company that was filming it, if my memory is again correct, it went belly up. There was two success. There's been a series of video games, and the video games have had levels of success. But like the most famous of them is like Vampire Bloodlines. It's still like the game still exists, but the company that made it no longer exists. The only reason the game exists is because there are essentially fan modders that have kept the game going, that have kept putting out new content for it, trying to fix the massive glitches that existed in the game before the company that initially made it went belly up and died. And then, of course, now, for people that may be aware, there's a second Bloodline. There's like a legacy. There's like a continuation. And that game hasn't gone well. And it hasn't gone well for that game producer either. There was 2 games for Hunter the Reckoning, or Hunter the Imbued, and again, the company that made them, the games are actually pretty good. But the company that made them, again, did not survive the process. They've made comic books, and again, those producers have not, done well. So essentially, the White Wolf Curse is that any other company that uses the IP dies a horrific corporate death.
Any advice for people that run 20th edition Vampire the Masquerade?
Yeah, read the book. You're gonna get the books or the PDF, and you're gonna go like, what the heck is this? And you're gonna have that moment of being overwhelmed. And I just gotta tell you, just breathe through it because you're gonna feel that overwhelmed. Because like I said, they are honking. Each book is thick. You put them together, and it's like you drop it on your foot, and it's like I've now broken my toes. My toes are now broken. There is serious amount of lore and stuff in there, so you're gonna be overwhelmed. So just kind of breathe through it, and then just like maybe create like a reading list, or like do one chapter at a time. But just do read the books, because there's a lot of there are some mechanical changes in there from earlier editions, and there's a lot of really nifty lore. That you don't even have to use in a vampire game. Like if you're running one of the other groups, there's lore in the Vampire the Masquerade 20th anniversary edition stuff that you could work into your other games. But yeah, so just grind your way through those books if you have to. Like drink plenty of coffee. Take breaks, breathe, and read.
On the flip side of that, any advice for people playing in the 20th edition version?
Yeah. Read the synopsis of every clan. Actually, first off, ask your storyteller if they're going to be doing a spat or Camarilla or independent. So for a player, just zero down on your clan or organization that you're going to be playing with. So if you're Camarilla, look at the synopsis of the Camarilla clans and just read them. Don't read any of the other stuff. Just read them. Concentrate on doing that character, and then as the game plays, slowly read into more lore. Like for the storyteller, they have to know pretty much everything, but as a player, you really only have to know your character and your character's background and their clan. And then just from there, through play, expand.
Besides not reading, is there any common pitfalls for players and people running the system?
Yeah, okay, so the world of darkness essentially is our world. Just a darker, more malicious one. So the problem, so because of that, there's a lot, there's going to be, times where your storyteller or your player are going to be wanting to introduce or have introduced or do introduce concepts from the actual real world that not everyone at the table is going to agree with or appreciate. So there's going to be triggers because they're like, because again it's a horror game too, right? So part of the horror is, to be scared or have that adrenaline rush, but also to push your boundaries, right? But if you push your boundaries too much, you're going to also step on other people's toes, and you're going to give them triggers for their own trauma. And that's bound up to happen in a game like World of Darkness or Vampire the Masquerade or any of them, because again, the World of Darkness is our world, just a darker version of it. So that's the big thing to be careful about, is because again, we're doing this for fun.
My final question's always the same. Anyone you would like to shout out at this time?
Yeah, 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 yeah. CJ. Okay, so I'm gonna refer to him as his character, CJ. CJ, I'm looking at you. I'm looking at you. I'm looking. I remember everything you've done. I remember it. I remember it. I'm watching. Yeah. Also, shout out to a former player, or who's still a player. No, you cannot do that to the ISS station. And no, no. Yeah.
I'm good. I'm good. Um, Discord and other social links are in the description. See you in the next video and all that jazz.
Bye, y'all.